How do you make a video about a game series that you love without the entire thing sounding like an obnoxious, overly long, nostalgia-filled love letter? Let's talk about Halo. I've wanted to do a video on games that are important to me for a while now. I mean, there's so much negativity on the internet, why not focus on something good for a change? Plus, the idea of breaking down the games that shaped how I look at the video game industry has been rattling around in my head for months now. And I figured there's no better place to start than my favorite FPS franchise ever, Halo. If you somehow happen to miss out on one of the biggest video game franchises of the past several console generations, Halo is a first-person shooter where, plays this guy, you fight some aliens, you go to this thing, blow it up, then you fight some robots, and then this guy nearly ruins the series. Then you're done, at least for now. The series has been a massive hit since the first game launched back in 2001, and the Master Chief basically became the face of Microsoft's console overnight. Now, Halo wasn't the first FPS I ever played. I'd been playing games like Star Wars Dark Forces and GoldenEye 007 for years before I even knew what an Xbox was. So, out of all of the other first-person shooters I've ever played, why did Halo stick with me for so long? How did a series about a faceless space marine fighting aliens and zombies end up changing my life? Starting at the most basic level, these games are damn fun to play. Moving from one analog stick to a pair of them did take some getting used to, but once my 14-year-old brain could wrap his mind around the new controller, other shooters simply couldn't compare in terms of pure playability. Moving, shooting, smacking enemies in the face, the first Halo game is just so fun. And bonus, the gameplay only got better as the series continued on. And look, I know that fun isn't the most elaborate of descriptors, but it's really hard to take an abstract concept like game feel and translate it into words without spending an hour going into a ridiculous amount of detail about stuff like animation timing or movement physics. Basically, Halo was fun largely because of its mechanical simplicity. Players don't do much other than running and gunning, but the developers have taken those systems and polished the hell out of them. Once you've got that sort of foundation, shuffling around the extra bits, like weapons, enemies, vehicles, that can be used to keep the gameplay interesting. It's the reason why the Halo campaigns are a near-perfect example of how a relatively simple gameplay loop can carry an entire game. Bungie once said that, if you can get 30 seconds of fun, you can pretty much stretch that out to be an entire game. And they were right. Despite using the same basic mechanics throughout the entire game, each firefight is unique with its own set of variables. String those individual sequences together and you've got a full level. From there, each level flows into the next, and that creates the game's overall pacing. Looking at this 100% scientifically accurate graph, we can see how each campaign takes the roller coaster approach to its pacing. There are some quieter moments, then some crazy intense battle, and then it quiets down again, and then it ramps up again. If you want to get even more granular, most individual levels do the same thing. There's an introduction, things slow down, then they ramp up again. You get the idea. Playing through Halo 1 and 2 was when I started to become aware of this rhythm, and by extension the developers' intentions. I could see past the moment-to-moment skirmishes and start to understand how the whole thing came together. I could see how the quieter moments made the bigger battles stand out, and how important it was to have a few minutes of relative peace after something huge went down. Yes, one could argue that the formula is getting a bit predictable after more than a decade, but that doesn't stop it from being fun. Oh, and, there's also that whole multiplayer thing. Halo was where my love of multiplayer shooters truly blossomed. I was the kid who spent his weekends setting up LAN parties and stayed up all night driving around Blood Gulch. I know high ground like the back of my hand, and maps like Hang 'em High and Lockout will always hold a special place in my heart. Of course, everything really took off when Halo 2 launched. Before then, getting a full 16-player match going took 2 weeks of planning and 4 separate console setups. Once the series went online, all it took to play with your friends was a few button presses. I will never forget playing Halo 2 multiplayer for nearly 30 hours straight the weekend it came out. And believe it or not, that actually started a trend. My sleep cycle tends to suffer whenever a new Halo game hits, and a lot of that has to do with just how well the campaign formula transfers to a player versus player environment. Hell, Halo even helped me figure out what kind of individual multiplayer modes I like. Side note, if your game has anything that even remotely resembles Halo Reach's invasion mode, I'm gonna want to play it. In general, I guess you could say that Halo solidified my love of first-person shooters. I feel like I've already said it a million times during this video, but these games are just really friggin' fun, even more than a decade after launch. Trust me, go pop in Halo 1. It might be a bit clunky by today's standards, but it's still as fun as hell. And like I said before, the gameplay is only getting better and better. Halo 5 Guardians introduced the new armor ability system that pushed the bar for high mobility gameplay in console FPS games. No, I'm not being facetious. The gameplay and movement in Halo 5 is so damn good that only one console shooter has even come close to matching its speed and fluidity, and that's Titanfall 2. I don't care what anyone says, the gameplay of Halo 5 was a revelation, even if the story sucked. Speaking of story, this may come as a surprise to some, but the story of Halo is another one of the major reasons why I've been a fan for so long. It's no secret that the series has pulled a lot of its tropes from other major works of science fiction, but it was through Halo that I experienced many of those tropes for the first time, and the same probably holds true for a whole lot of people. Be honest, had any of you heard of Ringworld before Halo came along? But I feel like the reason that the story works as well as it does is because of the relationship between its two main characters.
Me, inside your head, now.
On the surface, the Master Chief is another blank slate action game Space Marine, but there's more to his stoic and quiet demeanor than one might expect. On the other hand, there's Cortana, who acts as a perfect foil to the Chief, a computerized construct that shows more humanity than the actual human soldier she's paired with. There's a real chemistry between them, and exploring the bond between a soldier and his AI has frequently been the most interesting aspect of the series' overarching story. I mean, this scene alone is almost enough to make me cry.
But so much of me is wrong, out of place. You might be too late.
You know me. When I make a promise.
You keep it. I do know how to pick 'em.
Unfortunately, there was one major problem that came from getting invested in the Halo mythos as a kid. The games only came out once every 3 years. I know that a 3-year development cycle is pretty standard, but at the time it felt like an eternity. And as far as I knew, the only thing I could do was keep watching the same trailers over and over and over again. Unbeknownst to me, Microsoft had already set a plan in motion. If the games only came out once every few years, they'd just have to fill the gap with something else. Now, Halo did not create the concept for an expanded universe. Franchises like Star Wars had long since popularized the idea of stories that take place outside of the main arc. But Halo was one of the first major video games to get a similar treatment. And for me, who is desperate for anything related to the world of these games, Halo comics, novels, and short films were a dream come true. The narrative shown in the games was relatively simple, but there was more than enough foundation to establish a universe on. And better yet, a lot of the stories to come out of the Halo EU are actually pretty great. Nothing revolutionary, but there's a lot of genuinely good stuff there. Admittedly, I've fallen out of it in recent years. There's a lot to keep track of these days, but I still love reading about the ODSTs, the fall of Reach, how the Spartan 2s got their armor, and all of the other little side stories that came out of the Halo universe. To put it bluntly, there are only a few select video game franchises that can keep me engaged when I'm not holding the controller, and Halo is one of them. But, okay, forget all that. As much as I love the series for its story, its gameplay, all the fun I've had playing it, the biggest impact that Halo has had on me is, well, you're watching it. Were it not for Halo, I wouldn't be on the career path I am now. Some context. During the wait for Halo 2, I was desperate for any scraps of news about the game. Sadly, this was a time before gaming websites were as huge as they are now, and when browsing the web also tied up the phone line. As such, my love of all things Halo meant that I had to rely on a collection of ancient writings known as a magazine. And this led to my discovery of Electronic Gaming Monthly. EGM, in all honesty, deserves its own video. That magazine had a profound effect on how I view video games and the gaming industry. It gave me a basic understanding of how the business side of it all worked, how journalism tied into that, and an overall broader sense of what gaming culture was all about. Before that, I still had to rely on word of mouth to learn about what games were coming out, and I had zero concept of the inner workings of the industry. But with EGM, I was suddenly getting monthly updates on everything video games. Obviously, that included Halo and all of the details I never would have seen otherwise. Screenshots, interviews, updates from press-only shows that I literally dreamed of one day attending. Videos and trailers were the only gaps in EGM's coverage, but when my parents finally upgraded their internet connection, it didn't take long to find a way around that. I owe the folks at GameTrailers.com more than I could ever repay. If EGM introduced me to the gaming industry, then GT convinced me to try and join said industry. And again, I only discovered the site because of Halo. See, back before YouTube, trying to watch a video game trailer, say the reveal trailer for Halo 2, was a gigantic pain in the ass, if not downright impossible. There were actually DVD collections of E3 trailers, simply because that was more convenient than trying to find them online. Then came GameTrailers.com, an archive of gaming media that anyone could watch for free. Finally, I could watch that Halo 2 trailer, and basically any piece of gaming-related video I could ever imagine, whenever I wanted. Unsurprisingly, GameTrailers quickly became one of my favorite websites. It wasn't long before I was checking in daily. And as time went on, I watched the site grow and become one of the biggest and best sources for gaming news and commentary on the internet. Reviews, retrospectives, podcasts, live event coverage from shows all around the world. All throughout high school and college, I got to watch a bunch of insanely talented people make a career out of discussing, critiquing, and analyzing video games. You can probably see where I'm going with this. I've worked as a journalist, attended press-only gaming events, made a living reviewing games, and get to edit these videos about what I love because of GameTrailers and EGM. I can say with complete confidence that they changed how I looked at the industry and ultimately inspired me to join it. My career in gaming exists because of those publications. And going back one step further, none of this ever would have happened without this game about a walking tank and his AI best friend. It's weird that a single game has had such an important and ongoing influence on my life. For years, I believed that gaming was a waste of time and that I shouldn't take it as seriously as I do. But looking back, I can see how misguided that thought process is. Were it not for Halo, I wouldn't have been introduced to the industry side of gaming. I wouldn't have started looking at video games from a critical standpoint, and I wouldn't be able to spend my time focusing on what I love to do. In a lot of ways, I am where I am today because of Halo. That might sound silly to some, but all things considered, I think I got a pretty good deal.
Halo. It's finished.
No, I think we're just getting started.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm sorry it's been so long since a video came out. It won't happen again. I'm actually already in the middle of scripting my next video, so hopefully you guys get to see that soon. As always, if you want to help the channel grow, you can share this video around on stuff like Reddit and Twitter. You can also hit the subscribe button to get a notification as soon as I upload a video. Otherwise, thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.